Hey guys, SGT here. We've got one of my favorite truth tellers in the world on the line right now. It's Mike Rivero from whatreallyhappened.com. Michael, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, what a thrill. I just want everybody to know they can listen to your radio show, the What Really Happened radio show, each day from 11 to 2 p.m. Central on Republic Broadcasting Network, or subscribe to What Really Happened on iTunes and listen via MP3 the next day. That's what I do. Michael, there's so much to talk about, and I really want to talk about this Rand Paul endorsement of Mitt Romney, because it's really thrown a wrench in the spokes and sucked a lot of the life out of the people who really care about liberty.
Yeah, it is a very confusing situation, and my sense of it is I don't know that we have the whole story just yet to explain what's going on. Was a deal made of some kind between Romney and the Paul camp? And one possibility that seems to be coming up over and over again is that Ron Paul understands he's never going to be allowed to have the nomination, but he wants to go to that convention in Tampa. He wants his supporters on the floor in order to push their agenda on the platform for the GOP going into November. And I think a deal was made with Mitt Romney to accept Rand Paul's endorsement for the nomination in exchange for not blocking Ron Paul and Ron Paul's supporters from the convention floor. And that seems to make the most sense to me, because we were seeing all these preparations where the GOP was just looking for any excuse to not allow Ron Paul or his delegates or supporters onto the convention floor at all. Remember, that's what they did back in 2008 when Ron had all that popular support, and they literally would not allow him onto the convention floor. And after it was all over, they said, oh, gee, you did have enough delegates to be there. We're sorry, it won't happen again. We've been seeing all this massive vote fraud. In fact, we just apparently, it's been confirmed down in Texas that there was massive vote fraud against Ron Paul. So it's an ugly situation, and I think Ron Paul just decided he's never going to be allowed to have the nomination, but he wants to get out on that floor, and he wants to make his point about where we're going in terms of recovering the republic. And I think the Rand Paul endorsement was the quid pro quo to Mitt Romney to basically say, all right, if Ron Paul isn't really a threat any longer, then we can let him onto the floor and have his time making a speech and make his supporters happy. Because from the Mitt Romney point of view, their biggest problem now is they have stolen the nomination away from Ron Paul. But how are they going to prevent Ron Paul's supporters and voters from simply quitting in disgust and going over to Obama, or simply staying home in November? Because I know a lot of Ron Paul supporters, and I'm one of them, their attitude is, if Ron Paul isn't on the ballot, I'm not even bothering going to the election on November, and that, of course, is going to work against Mitt Romney.
But, what's so important for people to understand is that, I like to say that we're all in this mess together as it relates to our battle against the banksters who have really stolen our republic from us, as it relates to this, support of the campaign for liberty and Ron Paul as a true constitutionalist, somebody who would stand for the people, somebody who would not compromise and join the establishment. But it appears like that's what he's done. And I wrote a piece not long ago after this happened that said Rand Paul has betrayed someone, but who? And, the conclusion I drew, Michael, is that he betrayed the people. He betrayed us, not his father. Because to your point, I think that they're so close. They share a condo or an apartment there in Washington, D.C. when they're both there. Ron is his mentor, his father, his confidant. Clearly, they must have had a discussion about this. And that's why the betrayal feels so horrible. It's not as though he went on your show or the Alex Jones program. He went on Hannity and bowed on knee and, kissed the ring of the establishment.
Well, I agree, and I know a lot of people have taken it, very, very hard. But again, my position on my show all along was saying, as much as I like Ron Paul and what he has to say, there was never any way he was going to be allowed to the nomination. They would steal it from him, cheat him out of it. If necessary, they'd shoot him out of the nomination the way they did Robert Kennedy. So it was never going to happen. And I think Ron Paul stayed in the race this long to make his point that he was a credible candidate, that the people really did support him, that the media was wrong to dismiss him as a fringe candidate. He's actually done a lot of good by staying in the campaign as long as he did, and now he wants to go to the convention, as well he should, in order to basically say, this is what all the people who supported me are for, and you, Mitt Romney, will be extraordinarily foolish if you don't listen. If you don't listen to our voters, you won't have them in November. And I think that's the message he's trying to go in there. He can't win the nomination and he can't win the White House, but he's going to go in there to Mitt Romney and say, Mitt Romney had better adopt at least part of the Ron Paul platform, or he's not going to have the Ron Paul voters. Our problem, of course, is Mitt Romney is openly saying he's an etch-a-sketch, and what he says to get elected has got nothing to do with what he'll do once he's in the job. But I think that's really where this came down, is that deal was made that Rand Paul would endorse Romney, basically guaranteeing that Romney is going to have the nomination, and in exchange, Romney would do his best to court the Ron Paul supporters and voters back into the GOP.
Well, let me ask you this then, because I respect your intellect, and your knowledge of history is just fantastic. I'm always learning things from you. That's why I listen to your show. Dave Hodges writes in a piece called 30 Pieces of Silver, released a couple days ago, that Rand Paul now supports carbon taxes if he's going to advocate Mitt Romney. He now supports universal health care. He now supports more bankster bailouts, more endless wars of conquest. It's exactly what I wrote in my piece. Where's the line in the sand now for you? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I want this to turn out well, but where's the line in the sand? Because for me, it's sort of been crossed with this thing, and yet I still really respect Ron Paul.
Well, again, there is no line in the sand if he was never going to have the nomination. It was just, that's my situation. And again, I want to see what plays out on the convention. But as far as this whole carbon tax thing, everybody inside the United States government understands how desperate the government is for more revenue to try and deal with the financial crisis. Even Obama is now saying his highest priority in his second term is going to be global warming. So we're already seeing a relaunch of all this scaremongering by the carbon Nazis to try and force the carbon tax, because it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat. If they don't find a way to trick the American people out of more money, the whole thing's going to start coming apart. My opinion is it's not going to make it through to the election anyway, but that's the thinking inside Washington, D.C. right now.
Well, now that's very interesting. When you say you don't think it'll make it through to the election anyway, do you mean that this Ponzi system under which we live, this debt-riddled Ponzi, do you mean that will not make it? Do you think it's going to collapse?
I think it's going to come apart here almost imminently. Fitch has just downgraded another handful of Spanish banks, which means the bailout has already been overcome. It's just erased the benefit of the bailout because Spain's cost of borrowing has gone right through the roof. Over in Italy, the BNI bank has gone on a banker's holiday. It's going to be a month before they can transact customers' business anymore. Now they're talking about a bailout for Italy. And the rot is just spreading rapidly for reasons that I detailed in my article, The 11th Marble. And when Europe comes apart, there's all those derivatives that Wall Street recklessly sold against Europe's debt. They're going to come due and payable. Obama and Wall Street have already tried to set it up so the American taxpayer is going to be on the hook to pay for it. But we don't have that kind of money. We're talking $100 trillion in exposure. And when it all comes down, they might just inflate the debt away. We're going to be printing out, $100 trillion notes the way they're doing down in Zimbabwe, and it's still not going to be good enough. And I think, I know that back in 2008, George Bush Jr. tried the same stall tactic. He tried to hold together the economy looking halfway good for November, but it actually came apart in October. And I think I don't even think we'll make October. I would be very surprised if this thing was still functioning halfway decently end of August.
Well, that's so interesting. Now, I want to share this with you, and I'm going to give a call out to a friend of ours. Her name's Patricia. She emailed me after this Rand Paul endorsement of Romney went down, just apoplectic, feeling very, very, very duped, and saying that she feels duped by the entire liberty movement. She feels duped by this idea of buying silver because she's lost money. She just feels duped across the board, and I feel terrible about that. And what I emailed her back, Michael, was that we're all hurting right now. We're all feeling a bit duped, but it's by this system. It's by these banksters. It's by the people you call money junkies. And it's these people who are bringing down the system. It's these people that we should be angry at. It's these people.
Absolutely, absolutely. The important thing to remember is that as soon as Rand Paul made the announcement, the people who are opposed to the Occupy movement and opposed to what Ron Paul stands for were fanning the flames of, oh, you're betrayed, he's collapsed, he's sold out, because they want not just Ron Paul to not get the nomination. They want his entire philosophy to vanish from the American political scene and for everybody to scurry back obediently to the chosen candidates of the money junkies. And I don't think it's going to work. And that's why over at my website I was saying, don't jump to conclusions. There's parts of this we are not getting yet. And again, coming from my perception that there was no way Ron Paul was ever going to get the nomination, and I think Ron Paul knows he's never going to get the nomination, so the goal was, how do we move forward? How do we get our people to the convention? How do we try and at least bring our values to the platform for the November election? And I think it came down to a situation where if Ron Paul and his people just left in a huff, it basically guarantees Obama a second term. And I think it may yet do so. I think when the GOP anointed Mitt Romney as the candidate, they've pretty much come close to handing Obama his second term. And I think Ron Paul, to give him the benefit of the doubt, is now trying to think not just what's good for Ron Paul, but what's good for conservatism and the Republican Party. And as odious as Mitt Romney is, he is easy to manipulate. Whatever you tell him the people want to hear today, that's what he's going to be saying. And I think Ron Paul is thinking that better a Mitt Romney in the White House that Ron Paul can call on the phone and talk to than another 4 years of Obama who isn't taking phone calls from anybody.
Yeah, and I think it would be very helpful if Ron Paul could address his supporters and try to, redirect this thing in a positive way. We can move on, but what's your take on that? What should Ron Paul do right now to save this thing that he's built over the course of decades?
Well, it really is going to be up to Ron and Rand Paul. I mean, Ron Paul, I think he made it very clear this was going to be his last attempt at the White House because of his age situation. The question is whether Rand Paul can step in and inherit the mantle and the machine and the support to move forward. And that means they're going to have to repair some bridges after this endorsement. And that means, I think, at some point between now and the convention or immediately after the convention, Rand Paul's going to have to stand up and say, this is why we did what we did, and we did it in the best interest of preserving, the movement and what we're trying to accomplish, to take a step back so that we can take a future step forward. He's going to have to sell that to Ron Paul supporters or the whole thing is going to collapse.
Thanks for watching Part 1. Don't miss Part 2.